Okay, should we start with introductions again?
Good idea.
Okay, so I'm Tim, otherwise known as Dev B-Man.
I'm Nick, otherwise known as Blammo.
I'm Jeff, otherwise known as Nose.
And I am Ryan, otherwise known as Rome. Okay, we're here today with some absolutely serious questions, courtesy of Infernozilla. And Tim, I'm sure you've been asked this before, but what inspired FORTS?
Okay, at the time I was playing a lot of this game called Bridge Builder by Pontifex, and it was a really simple physics game where you build a bridge to span a chasm and have to make it strong enough to support a train that traveled across it. And I really enjoyed the physics, and I thought it had a lot of potential. And I just sketched a few ideas out, and the first one was basically build towers and put guns on them. And I instantly knew that there was a good idea there. And this was way back in 2003. I've got a work log that dates back to that, so it's been a really long project, but that's where it originated.
I know you've also mentioned gorillas too.
Yeah, well, I mean, I played a few games in my childhood that, were based around artillery. Guerrillas was one. I think that was on the Commodore 64, where you just throw bananas at each other, turn-based, and you just set an angle and a strength and see where the banana landed. But there were others like Scorched Earth, for example, that were quite popular during their time.
I know you said it started in 2003. What was the most challenging part of development? I know you've mentioned an issue that actually the inspiration from Steam wound up being the solution for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are plenty of challenging aspects to it, but there was one that stumped me for a while, and that was connecting to a host through a NAT, or Network Address Translator. At the time, I was using a library called RACnet, which was based on UDP, and I just couldn't figure it out, even with the help of the developer of RACnet. Couldn't connect to a host reliably, and so I just decided it was too hard, and I just put it on ice. I don't know for how many years, might have been 3 or 4 years, and I came back to it, not worrying about that problem, but eventually it was solved quite simply by using Steam's networking systems. It was just naturally figured out for me.
So Steam does provide some solutions that developers can take advantage of.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, they've done a lot of work. Not everything's perfect, of course, but it's pretty good. And for 90% of what we need, it does the job.
Okay, you mentioned some sketches that you made. Now, Nick, could you talk about what inspired your take on the art style for FORTS?
When Tim first came to me with the game back in 2008, he already had a sort of 2.5D look to it. My approach was, because it's going to be part-time hobby, amount of time I could put into the game, I needed it to be fairly simple. And at the time, we were working on a pretty intense gritty sci-fi 3D game at work. So I wanted something sort of contrast against that for my own sort of sanity, I suppose. And I really liked the Metal Slug series of games, the great little characters, and especially the animations. So I decided to go for a 2D aesthetic. I mean, the game is 2D anyway, and fairly simple backgrounds as well. I wanted it to be quite easy to iterate and add assets. The first task was to go through and basically reskin the whole game. At that point, we just had one environment, which ended up being the canyon environment, which is the environment you see in the background of Tim's window there. And so basically I went with that sort of little chunky little characters, kind of. I guess that was inspired as well by the sort of whimsical nature of the physics, the sort of the wobbling and the falling down of the towers and stuff. So I thought it complemented it fairly well, and I'm pretty happy that I went in that direction, to be honest, because now we've got a bunch of people modding things. It makes it a lot easier for people to sort of cut up sprites and make their own sprites and stuff. If we had a more involved art style, it would have been a lot more difficult to sort of integrate user-created content with the game content. So it's sort of worked out nicely. More of a happy accident. I know Tim was keen on modding from the beginning, but it sort of panned out nicely.
Now, I've seen some early assets, and the art style definitely changed over the years. How much of that was Tim, and how much was when you came on board? Because I'm not really sure what time period these are from.
Yeah, there's a sort of distinct point where you can tell. I mean, basically, the assets you see now, the like I say, the canyon background, the Eagle Empire sprites, and all the vanilla weapons, they're all basically first generation iterations from me. So those all date back to 2008, those sprites. And then the rest of it came online later. You might notice by the time High Seas comes along that the environments in particular a little bit more sophisticated looking. I think that's more sort of me wanting to evolve the style a bit more and challenge myself a bit more and just see what's possible with the engine without breaking it. I've got certain boundaries to work in. So yeah, but I must obviously talking about making it easy to replicate. Every time I add something new, it's like, oh, now I've got to add something for another environment or whatever. I'm gonna have to replicate this again. So got to be careful not to overdo it and make things difficult for myself going forwards.
The High Seas backgrounds are absolutely beautiful, and again, just to repeat the call from the Discord, desktop backgrounds, please.
Oh yes, I do remember that call. Yeah.
Yeah, the animations in some of the backgrounds are really great too. The orbital laser coming down and dishes exploding and such.
Yeah, that was really fun actually. That was a really easy, well not easy, but it's a fairly simple way of once you guys got the tech in to add a bit of depth. Obviously, as I was saying, FORTS is a 2D game, but just with elements happening in the background, it sort of all of a sudden adds an extra depth layer, which sort of expands people's sort of perception of the world and the immersion. Those are fun. The volcano as well.
Okay, Jeff, essentially the same question. How did you decide on the sounds for FORTS, and did you have a starting point to go with?
The sound effects and stuff are actually inspired a lot by the art that Nick made. When I was putting together the sounds of the UI, for example, I was imagining the character that we can see in Tim's image there, the scientist. He's sitting there with stuff in front of him, and maybe the control panels of the different machinery that all these characters are using. Those are what was inspiring me for the sound of, say, the UI and stuff. As in terms of the sound of the weapons themselves, I felt like I wanted it to sound just really satisfying and big explosions and bombastic, because that's just cool, So I was just after that, and I also wanted there to be a sense of depth, depending on how close the camera was to the action. So I wanted to have it so it felt like there were things that were positional and distant in a 2D game, that it still had a sense of 3D from an audio point of view. And then musically, I wanted something that sounded a little bit orchestral to go with the drama of battle and the highs and lows of battle. But then I also wanted it to be kind of fun sounding and a little bit electronic, because that's just kind of fun and adds energy to it. So yeah, I was just kind of going off of playing the game and finding and creating music that just seemed to fit the moment that I was in while playing. So yeah, that's sort of how I went about it.
I really like the in the sound effects. So this is where Jeff's sort of expertise comes in. When you've got the crashing and explosions and stuff, there's sounds of glass breaking, and from my point of view, I'm thinking I don't remember putting any glass in there, but it just really adds to the whole sort of carnage and just destruction of having this glass sound effect added in with all the other bits, the layering you've got in there, really satisfying wallop when the cannon smashes through. And the cannon as well was I really enjoyed when that first went in. The recoil on the cannon, the effects and the sound effects all work nicely. Tim's got a nice slide on the cannon as it sends the shell out the barrel, and it all sort of all three disciplines complementing each other.
I think before Jeff started, I'd added some sound effects, and the few that I remember, there was some weapon hurt sounds.
Those
So
are still
the
in
screams
there.
that you hear.
Those are still
Yeah.
in. Yeah. And,
And,
the when the reactor gets hurt as well, that sound is still the original.
Oh, the beeping, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I think armor breaking, there might be one or two of those left in there.
Yeah, that might be. I'm trying to think what I replaced. I did go through and replace a bunch, but yeah, there was some of those, like those weapon hurt sounds are hilarious. They're still funny to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so to go back a little bit about the origins, the RTS genre it's challenging. How did you decide, especially by the time it was nearing release, I guess it was less of a choice, but to go with the RTS, in an era where the RTS genre really does struggle?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I always saw it as real time, and there are questions about how you would make it turn-based and still make it engaging, especially with 8 players and a lot of things to do. So it just seemed like a natural fit for me, and I didn't really question it that much. I think Nick at one point thought it was going to be turn-based. He wasn't sure about real time, but I think he came around in the end.
Well, I think that's pretty much 100% down to getting walloped by you every time we played it, and the learning curve, and like feeling overwhelmed, which I think is borne out in the sort of difficulty we've had in onboarding people and teaching people how to play the game. Yeah, but that was definitely a product of me getting smashed and thinking I need some time to think here before I'm getting walloped by multiple cannons when I've just got my machine gun ready to go.
I don't think most bridge building simulators, especially with a complex physics model, really did much necessarily in real time. So I sort of wonder, like how did you approach making it accessible to people?
I don't know how to answer that. I mean, there's so many things that we've added over the years to make it easier to play, like automatic doors and hollowing out a space in front of the weapon, being able to extrude a box from a strut. There are just bits and pieces that we've added over time. The snapping.
Auto AA, I think, was another thing. I remember that didn't exist initially, and I think somebody put it to us like, hey, you should put automatic anti-air in there because it's really hard.
And repairing it over an area, you used to have to just click on each strut individually and repair them.
Right.
Yeah, so if you get rid of that, get rid of automatic AA, you get rid of extrusion, you really do have hard mode.
Yeah.
And in fact, extrusion came on quite late as well. That was pretty late in development. I guess the more, like, you spend like years developing it, and then all of a sudden at the end, when you're starting to sort of consider it as a viable product, more and more people are seeing it and just bringing all these things to light that were always there but never had the scrutiny.
Yeah, and when you play it yourself as a developer, you're just used to everything, so you don't know what other people don't know until they play it and they're like, how do you do this? Or this is just really hard.
Or why do they want it in turn-based?
Yeah.
I think on your 1-year anniversary post, you had sold something like 200,000 copies, and the number of people who had completed the campaign on hard was just over 200.
That's a pretty good ratio.
Yeah. And they got a little badge for it too, so,
Yeah. No, we should have a special unique badge. I completed hard mode without AA.
Yeah.
Ironically enough, once players have gotten their chance to really dig in and figure out, and optimize, people don't generally build AA in the campaign anymore anyway.
Ryan.
If people try, though, they will definitely find it a challenge unless they can figure out what those players have come up with.
Yeah.
I would not advise that for new players. Mortars exist.
I think we have either just or are about to removing the ability to have manual AA in the options in the multiplayer. Is that right, Tim?
Yes. Yeah, it'll just be automatically on all the time. We find that some people accidentally turn it off and then wonder why their machine guns aren't firing. So there's just not much reason to have that option anymore.
So the streamlining continues.
Yeah, we add some things and we take some things away. That's how it works. Not many things, though.
If you could answer in turn, which commander is your favorite and why?
I think my favorite one is it Buster with the depleted uranium ammunition?
Yeah, that was the one I was going to choose.
Yeah, I got in there first. He just does like a lot of pyrotechnics and satisfaction when you see those shells zipping ever deeper into the enemy fort.
Yeah.
That's pretty fun.
It is satisfying.
I also enjoyed drawing the character as well, especially the defeated one with all the mutations.
Okay, so we have 2 for Buster.
I've got a soft spot for Architect, I think. I just like being able to, knock out a heavy weapon in 10 seconds or something. It's great when you need it.
Yeah. So I just like there's a few I like. I like Seep with the fast missiles and rockets. I like Scattershot. Now he's got the shotgun 20mm. Moonshine with his EMP weapons. That's pretty good. And I've always got a soft spot for Firebird. Just fire. It's always satisfying.
And the suppression of the fire alarm.
Yeah.
Always like,
sneaky one. Yeah, that's another thing actually. Talking about making it more accessible, that was introduced late on. People not realizing, going to, shows like PAX and people not realizing they're on fire. We really need to give people a hand here. Because their fort would just fall down. They wouldn't know what's going on. Oh, what happened?
I was going to say it would have been hard to hear a fire alarm in an exhibition anyway, but yeah, it's a good point.
I'm going to have to vote for Moonshine here again, just because one of my early memories was playing a game against Merrick's at the time #1, and demonstrating exactly how far the EMP effect would affect missiles from a cannon. Because he launched and I hit the front of his base, and the missiles at the rear of his base went crazy as a result, and it took him completely by surprise when the warhead decided to make a U-turn.
Awesome.
Those unexpected effects just make forts, I think. There's those moments where the unusual happens.
Even things that you didn't predict when you were coding them?
No, I mean, we had ideas. I mean, it was just a general physics engine that could do a lot of things, but yeah, the players just showed us what could be done, really. We were busy making the thing and not really experimenting that much.